Hello everyone. In this video we're going to review some of the important concepts from Chapter 5, Section 5.5 of your textbook, Understanding and Solving Ratio and Proportion Problems. Now this ties back somewhat to what we were dealing with fractions, and basically I just wanted to kind of review the terminology that was presented there. It's important. I cut down the steps a little bit, simply to make for purposes of clarity. There's a much more detailed explanation in your textbook, but I think that what we go through here, I'll break it out for you, and then we're going to do just a simple problem rather than the one that's in your textbook, so we're dealing with some smaller numbers. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the important concepts. The two terms, ratio and proportion, are commonly used in the business world. A ratio is basically a fraction. So many people look and they see a ratio written as 5 to 3. What they don't realize is that's actually the fraction of 5/3. And it's a fraction that compares two sets of numbers or quantities. In your book it talks about, I think something like 5 cats to 3 dogs. It's just talking about, in many ways, a comparison. It's the relationship. There's 5 to 3. So that's a ratio. A proportion is when we take two ratios. And what we're trying to figure out, we have one set of ratio, another set of ratio, kind of get the idea of, if it's this particular quantity or this particular type of amount, what would it be if it was increased or decreased? There's a couple key things to keep in mind when you're dealing with that, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about that. But these are the two terms. You probably know the difference between them. Ratio is where we set it up. Proportion is where we're going to do the problem. So when we talk about steps, basically they're going to give you 3 pieces of information. And this is actually going to be important when we start to talk about percentages, because with percent problems, just like with proportion problems, you get 3 pieces of information. You have to solve for one of those pieces of information. And the key to success is figuring out what it is that you have to solve for. If you can figure out what the other 3 are, that makes figuring out that last one so much easier. I'm going to show you some processes that I use to kind of make it a little bit easier. Basically what you need to do when you're setting this up is you read that problem, you figure out what the 3 pieces of information are, and then you figure out what is it that you want to solve for. The next is to set up that proportion as a fractional relationship. And I'm going to show you what that looks like and when we start to do the problem. Then we already know how to cross multiply. And basically once we cross multiply, then we're going to solve for the unknown. So let's go ahead. I made up my own simple problem for this particular video just to kind of demonstrate how to set this up. So let's say Sue bakes 6 cakes in 2 hours. Okay? How many can she bake in 10 hours? Like I said, 3 pieces of information are here in this problem. What are the 3 pieces? Well, one of the things that we have here, we know she can do 6 cakes in 2 hours. We've got 6 cakes in 2 hours. Okay. What we're trying to figure out is how many cakes can she bake in 10 hours. Notice when you set up the proportion, the key, your success to this, is making sure that you group the same items in the numerator and the same items in the denominator. So here, in 2 hours, when we set up this proportion, we've got 10 hours now. We want to know how many cakes in 10 hours. Then, what do? We cross multiply. And we know how to do that. So when we cross multiply, what happens when you cross multiply and you have a variable? You just multiply it as a variable. You end up with 2 times x. What does that give you? We're all used to 2x. So we end up with 2x, and then we have 10 times 6, which is 60. So all I did was cross multiply those amounts, okay? I still have our x as our variable. The x is what we're trying to figure out because that's going to tell us how many cakes we're going to get in 10 hours. So I do my equation, and 60 divided by 2 is 30. So x equals 30. So what we're saying is, in 2 hours, she can bake 6 cakes. In 10 hours, she could bake 30 cakes. If we had 20 hours, we could take it out from there. We figure she could do 60 cakes. So it's just showing you how to set the proportion. The key to remember is make sure you have your numbers, your items, lining up cakes to cakes, hours to hours when you're setting up that proportional relationship. Also, too, keep in mind, 3 key pieces are there. They will have 3 key pieces when we start to do percentages, which is coming up in our next chapter. Get 3 pieces, you have to figure out what's the 4th piece you're solving for. And that ends chapter 5, section 5.5 on understanding and solving ratio and proportion problems.